I've been asked to give my views, I understand not as President of the Constitutional Court, but as former negotiator and President of COP21, to give my views on this broad question. Where do we stand today in terms of climate action? I will try to answer. Then I will say a few words about an initiative that I've launched with many other specialists and which now has been endorsed by the French President Macron and which is just now being discussed by the UN, the name of which is the Global Pact for the Environment. But first, I would like to draw briefly a broad picture of where we are as far as climate action is concerned. And I will speak bluntly. The situation is worrisome. The adoption of the Paris Agreement in December 2015 was in itself a very successful step, and it has been considered as a turning point. 195 countries decided to adopt the first universal climate pact in history. We achieved a robust agreement, which is simultaneously universal, ambitious, fair, and I would say as legally binding as possible in those circumstances. As you know, it includes, and this result was far from settled in advance, the objective of holding the increase in the global average temperature to, quote, well below 2 degrees, above pre-industrial levels, and, quote, of pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to only 1.5 degrees. It includes as well the aim of carbon neutrality by the second half of the century, and this formula is a bit general. Furthermore, and it is very important, a mechanism for a 5-yearly review of commitments is planned with the obligation of always going upwards in the ambition and no backsliding. This success was achieved maybe partly because of an exceptional diplomatic endeavor, but mostly it was due to a context that previous conferences did not enjoy. This is what I call a sort of alignment of planets. The first one is the science planet. The remarkable work of scientific IPCC experts has been really decisive by establishing unquestionably the reality of global warming, its human origins, and its exacerbation. And precisely, I understand we shall begin this morning's session of the conference by reviewing the scientific basis of climate action. Where do we stand in terms of scientific research on climate change, especially in the Mediterranean and the Middle East? This is an occasion for me to congratulate very warmly all scientists, and particularly those who attend this conference, for their crucial role in the diagnosis, the alert, and the elaboration of concrete solutions concerning global warming. The second planet was and is the social planet, which contributed largely to the Paris success. Awareness of the need for an agreement had risen prior to the Paris conference, with a significant increase in commitment from regions, cities, NGOs, economic and financial stakeholders, religious and spiritual authorities, as well as citizens all around the world. And third, the political planet was also in a favorable position. Beyond the strong commitment of the European Union and various partners, Chinese President Xi and former President Obama gave bold support, which was absolutely decisive, as it was a requisite for success that the two largest greenhouse gas emitters should be on board. And as you know, this Paris Agreement was ratified with an unprecedented rapidity. However, and it is what I call the post-Paris paradox, despite the great success of the Paris Agreement, the overall situation today is critical and, in some aspects, worsening. The year 2017 was the warmest on record without an El Niño event, and one of the 3 warmest years. The average global temperature has already been through a 1 degree Celsius increase in 2015 in comparison to pre-industrial levels. 1.5 degrees could be reached in the 2030s and maybe even before. 2 degrees could be passed by 2050. That is 50 years before our intended target. The CO2 emissions have been on the rise again in 2017, after having stayed stable for a while. And as the latest emissions gap report, which has been issued by UNEP a few months ago, pointed out, despite the efforts of the international community, quote, current state pledges cover no more than a third of the emission reductions needed, unquote, to limit the temperature rise at 2 degrees. Extreme weather episodes are bound to become more frequent and more intense, leading to more expenses and costing human lives. In short, the deterioration is worse and faster than what we imagined. The figures regarding oceans, forests, pollution, agriculture and food, and more generally environment are critical. The red alert is on. Second, the current state of the world energy mix is worrisome. Surely renewable energies are developing fast, and in particular in this region. And we could take, for example, also the very positive initiative of the International Solar Alliance. Or we could take Bill Gates' $1 billion fund called Breakthrough Energy Ventures to invest in new forms of clean energy. And the development of these new resources is really, really impressive. However, about 80% of the entire global energy mix still relies today on the burning of fossil fuels. In terms of technology and financing, renewable energy resources are much more easily accessible and much cheaper than before, and it's a magnificent progress. But they do remain unequally scattered throughout regions and quantitatively insufficient. We shall have a precise presentation on this crucial topic this afternoon. Third, The world has suffered, and I speak bluntly, a major setback when the new American president announced his intention to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Let me be clear. Given the gravity of the situation, it is what I consider as a dangerous nonsense. Not only does it exclude the second biggest polluter from the Paris Climate Agreement, which will be detrimental to the US themselves, but it also gives a very bad example to some other countries that might have some doubts about whether to keep really engaged or not. In spite, and I want to underline that, of the remarkable reaction in the US themselves of many cities, regions, universities, companies that we have to congratulate, President Trump's decision might not destroy the worldwide movement towards climate action, but it is a very serious blow. And fourth, there are some decisive question marks regarding the attitude of various countries. One of the key issues lies in particular in the question of coal, and more specifically, coal in South Asia. When you look at the figures, if the decision taken by several South Asian countries to launch the construction of new coal-fired power plants is maintained, the goal of a 2 degrees rise in temperature will become very, very difficult and almost unachievable. In order to avoid a global catastrophe, alternative solutions have then to be found rapidly. Regarding particularly China, which plays a major role, its fascinating new Silk Road has to be a green Silk Road. Otherwise, its very strong and positive national commitment to the action against climate change would stay incomplete. The same goes for oil-producing countries who are now at a crossroad and need to choose, I would say, between two paths. Either they keep their course of action and continue to fully exploit their fossil fuels, since it is the main source of their GDP, or they decide, either rapidly or step by step, to shift to renewable energies and face the still existing problem of intermittence and storage. For countries that depend so much on fossil fuels, none of these choices is easy, but their decision will be critical in the achievement of the global climate goals. And this observation is true, particularly for these regions, where financial resources and perspectives come largely from fossil fuels, energy, whereas within the present state of science, climate action requires that a large part of them in the future would remain unexploited. The evolution of the energy mix, especially the level of investment in renewable energies, and particularly solar, will be a crucial issue for the years to come. Last but not least, the progress made on the issue of carbon pricing will be decisive. It is the purpose of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, a voluntary partnership of national and subnational governments, businesses, and civil society organizations committed to expand the use of effective carbon pricing policies, and personally, I think it will be decisive.